Without a word of standards, and this is a picture that I have taken out from one of the conferences or the meetings that I went to. It's an international meeting, and what you can see is the electrical plugs and sockets, and you can see that there is all kind of plugs that you can see out here, and this is actually the reality across the world, and that's the lack of standardization. However, a very good example of what worked in standards was in this industry, which is the credit card industry. That piece of plastic that you see, you can put it into any machine and it recognizes across the world. And that was only possible because that industry decided, even before anything else, let's talk about standards. And that's the achievement in the credit card industry. Just see what a world of difference is there when you actually begin to work with standards. In the 50s, that's Debbie, and there were many others like him. They started to understand that when we are looking at work, the way we work, the processes that we use for working, if you actually make them standardized and we actually work on processes, we would get an improved output in better quality and more consistent quality. And that led to a creation of another generation of standards, which are management system standards. And when we talk about standards today, we are actually emerging into a third generation of standards. The first generation being, these were product standards, dimensional standards, and we competed, the companies competed using those specifications and so on. But however, this meant that you inspect things. The second generation standards were system standards, management system standards, and we are familiar with those. And incidentally, the ISO 9000 is one of those very few standards in the beginning which we started to get, and now there are many, many more. It actually leads to better processes. And the third generation of standards, which is now emerging, and it's happening quite rapidly, are behavioral standards. How do people behave? So when you're looking at this particular change in the way standards have been created, it is a need of the businesses, it's the need of the industry that has actually led to that. You know, I talk about standards mainly because BSI, which is British Standards Institution, we are the pioneers in making standards. So it's part of our DNA. We created the ISO 9000, which used to be a British standard 5750 way back in 1939. We created ISO 14000, we created so many other standards, but in fact 10 out of the 12 most popular standards have been created by BSI. Information security standard was a British standard not too long ago, and even now, as I speak, we have created one of the latest standards, and that's on organizational resilience, and I'll come to that. That's a BS standard as well today. It's BS 65000. What has standards done to India? In 1991, India was a closed economy. In a closed economy, companies did not compete on really good quality. And in those years, prior to 1991, the Indian manufacturing, Indian services was pretty much shut down. However, something happened in 1991. Indian companies were at around the same time starting to experiment with a standard. At that time, it was very, very new. It was the ISO 9000. In those years, in the early 90s, it was rocket science. Today, it is not rocket science. People say that is, it's the most. If the customer never asks us for ISO 9000, we don't even bother about it. It doesn't make any sense to us. However, I have a slightly different opinion on that, and I'll try to help you people change your minds, because that is one of the fundamental things which happen to us as a country. The standards, these standards, the ISO 9000, the 14000, and so many other standards, are actually nothing but knowledge. And these standards are viewed as the best practices. And what has happened is, in before 1991, and we used to have cars, Fiats and Ambassadors. A few of them still survive, but they no longer get manufactured. And in those days, you had to wait 3 years before you could get in one of the cars. and you had to, and you would be very lucky if you had got it in about 3 years' time. And what used to happen is when you get a car, you could not go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, the paint is not so very good, it's not consistent, or you cannot say the gaps between the doors and the other fitments are not really perfect. So what? They're giving you a car, they're giving you, what more can you expect? And what if it makes a little bit of noise? If it rattles a bit, well, that's the car. However, when you talk about a car, you do realize that a car is dependent on its supply chain. The quality of the car. The OEM has got nothing more than a shed and a set of screwdrivers and spanners. He gets components from different parts of the supply chain, they can fit it into the car, and at the end of it, the OEM gives you and sells you a car. So it's the quality of these parts which actually create the quality of the car. And what has happened before 1991, and I used to go into these component manufacturers, especially in the north near Delhi, and what you would find is very, very tiny workshops. You could not tell the color of the machines because they were coated with grease and oil and dirt, and that would be black most of the time. The floor parts used to be completely cobbled up with dirt and metal turnings and whatever you have. The materials used to lie on the floor. The atmosphere was very dingy, very smoke-filled, and lighting was not so very good. In such conditions, when you have manufacturing, obviously you cannot expect any quality coming out of it. And at that time, the automotive industry, especially starting from Maruti and so on, they started insisting to the component suppliers, go for ISO 9000, you have to be certified. And after that, it went into QS 9000, which is automotive standard, went now into ISO TS 16949. And what you find is, in about a very short span of 10 to 12 years, this whole component industry, the whole supply chain transformed itself and actually started producing world-class components. About 15, 16 years ago, one of the biggest news items for India, and it's a big achievement for us, was one of the Indian companies won an order to supply a high-tech automotive component to none other than General Motors, and that too in the US. And you know what that component was? It was a radiator cap. That was, what Indian manufacturing was all about. Today you have, thousands of these manufacturers supplying components right across the world, getting fitted into the best cars across the world. And that's the story. And I'll tell you one thing, that I've been in this industry, in the certification industry for the last 26, 27 years now. And in this period, I've seen the transformation which actually a system creates. I've also seen that companies do not bother about systems, and they don't actually implement them with the same degree of zeal they used to do that a long time ago. When you talk about standards, there are two things that you must keep remembering. One is regulatory. Do you recognize that symbol? It's a traffic symbol. It talks about that's the speed limit, and that's regulated. You are mandated not to exceed that limit. Isn't that right? So that's a regulation. And then you have voluntary standards. And most of today's standards happen to be voluntary standards. And there's a good reason for having voluntary standards and not regulations. Because in the past what we've seen is that when you have regulations, things tend to get a bit more confused. There's a lot more bribery coming in, a lot more unethical things happening. So globally, standards have started to evolve into voluntary standards and specifications. So that's the difference between regulations and standards are nothing but knowledge. They're prepared by companies like us, but what happens really is that the knowledge is from the industry. The industry gives their knowledge to create a standard. So a standard is nothing but the best practice. Put it into a small document, available widely, and it can be implemented across by a larger group. It's a beautiful way of training people. It's a wonderful opportunity to use that to train people within the organization. And that's the benefit of what standards do. The earlier speakers were talking about risks, and when we talk about the risk, you can see there's so many risks which are there as part of supply chains. But what needs to be understood that risk must be proactively managed. And the second part is the supply chains have increased quite extensively globally, and due to which the risks have dramatically increased. And we have seen the impacts of that. I will not get into details because we've got a 15-minute slot. The supply chain we should be looking at it in a much more closer manner in terms of risk management. I didn't catch the name of the gentleman who was introducing, but he did actually go along with the word resilience. And this is a word that you're going to hear more and more in the coming years. This is a very new word, resilience. And we're talking about the organizations to be resilient, the supply chain to be resilient. And it's not a surprise, because if your business depends on the supply chain, what you expect it to be is that it has to be resilient. So when you're talking about resilience, we actually be looking at, of course, the product or service, the process, and the people. This is fundamental to any kind of systems. And you can actually look at this through operational resilience. How do you execute a particular process? It can be any part of the process. It can be a manufacturing process, it can be an insurance process, it can be a transportation process. Any of the processes is part of the operational resilience. That needs to be resilient. And of course, you have some supply chain resilience, and we talk about the information resilience. Information plays a very major role today, much more than in any period of time earlier, and therefore you must be looking at information resilience across the supply chain. An organization should be robust. That means it must be really strong. An organization must also be adaptive. And this, if you look at what Darwin said, was it's not the fittest which will survive. It's the most adaptive to change the species those species will survive. And that is what we talk about. An organization has to be adaptive. And if you're not adaptive, you really will start to perish. I mean, we're talking about today, there was a mention by the gentleman from Indus Towers about the new competition from Reliance Jio coming along. Obviously, they're bringing a totally new concept, which is voice over data. And that is a concept which the others have not actually been using. But it's a game changer probably. But that really means that the competitors have to be adaptive. They must be very quickly adapt to the changing circumstances, and not just in the price. They will also adapt in terms of service delivery and so on. They could have been adapted. They could have, foreseen what was coming. In fact, I have a Geo 3 months ago, directly from Reliance. They gave it to us, but we were using Geos 3 months ago. Absolutely impressive speeds. So you need to be adaptive, and then you need to be agile. You need to change fast. You've got to be responding quickly. So those are the three key words in the resilience part. And all of that leads to continual improvement. And if you look around, the environment is of various processes, including governance processes. Then you can see finance. You can see culture, and then all of these things: reputation, vision, purpose, adaptive capacity, etc. So how do you look at it, the organizational resilience? Actually the iceberg concept, pretty much used in the past, but I'll use it again. And above the water is all those things like strategy and vision and purpose and finance and ISO 9000s and ISO 14000. All of that is above it. And organizations think that they're doing a fantastic job when they are actually addressing this. So let's have a look at something else. Let's have a look at what's beneath the waterline. And that's the more challenging part. Is the culture? It's actually something to do with people. And if you want resilience, in respect to the fact of how much of automation you can put in, it is the people's behavior, culture and behavior. And nowadays, most big organizations across the world, they're actually paying more attention to behaviors. And by the way, you may be thinking about values. Values are, most companies, the values are all the same. When you just walk in, you'll find always the values are slightly different from each other, but most of the values are similar. But however, what the companies fail to do is, they do not define behaviors, how to support values. And they don't look at the attitudes of people, how do you change them, how do you make it together, the perceptions and feelings. So when you talk about culture, when you talk about company culture, this becomes very, very and significantly more important today. So we got a lot of standards, and we've talked about the quality standards, 9,000 and 14,000 and so on. And then of course we have the other standards which are directly related with supply chain. The ISO 28,000, the 27,000 is also related with information security, very important in supply chain. In business continuity, somebody did mention earlier, both the speakers earlier were talking about business continuity, and that is now an ISO standard, 22301. Then of course we have other standards which have emerged. Incidentally, I would recommend Indus Towers to have a look at the ISO 31000. It's on pure risk management. It is not a certifiable standard. It's available. Then we are also evolving in new standards like the energy management. It's not just a fad, but really doing something on energy management using a formal approach is the ISO 50001. Then we have many. I'm not telling you all the standards, but I'm just giving you a brief overview. Then of course I spoke to you about behavioral standards. The anti-bribery standard, very much part of the supply chain industry, which is still a British standard, 10,500. Then you have road traffic safety, again for transportation, very, very important. How do you make sure that companies are looking at safe driving, safe conditions, and so on. So you have the road traffic safety. Not too many companies in India have used this road traffic safety, but definitely those who have actually started showing some dramatic results. Delhi International Airport has about 46 kilometers of roads under its purview, right around the perimeter, and all of those have road traffic safety. And you can actually see that they have paid so much management attention to that they actually make sure that there are less number of accidents in such a wide road where people like to speed. And then, very importantly, when we talk about supply chain, it's a whole lot of collaboration. Today we talk about Airtel, the brand Airtel. It's entirely a business based on collaboration relationships. And BS 11,000 is all about collaborative relationships. Then of course you have industry specific standards. And then as we speak, the logistics industry is also coming up with other standards. And some of them, like the CDPAT, will be there, and there are standards like the TAPA standards that somebody else is going to be talking through today. So to conclude, the golden truths: standards accelerate innovation. Those who build standards, they actually get a competitive advantage. So when you see TAPA is actually building some new standards and coming up with newer requirements, what they're doing is they're building a competitive advantage to their members. Standards, they structure and lubricate markets, enabling them to grow very fast, and standards show repeatable organizational performance. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was what I wanted to tell you about standards and how they will actually help. And trust me, I've been around for close to 40 years of experience in different parts of the world. I can tell you, standards have actually transformed countries, standards have transformed industries, they have transformed right across the company itself. So thank you very much. Yes, I don't know, can you take the question? Okay, BSI was the oldest standards making body, the first and the oldest standards making body in the world. Incidentally, just BSI came into existence because of India. In 1898, there was an Indian government circular which said that all the Indian railway procurements shall be made to the engineering standards as published by the Institution of Civil Engineers in London. And because of the sudden requirement of more specifications and so on, it was mainly for railway gauges. I showed you the picture, you know why. So what happened is that this particular 8 people in the Institution of Civil Engineers was taken away, and they created something called the Engineering Standards Committee for creating standards, specifications, and that became BSI. And then much later, other standards bodies evolved around the world, and ISO came into being because all these standards bodies, they decided that there should be an international organization. So they all came together. We are the founding members of ISO. We still pay £2 million just to support the organization, the international organization standardization. We have a stake in that, but we are the founding members of ISO. Now what happens is that ISO being a global forum, there are many requirements for different stakeholders. And the more the number of stakeholders, the slower is the process of developing a standard. But BSI is a national standards body of UK. It's not government of UK. It doesn't belong to anybody at all. It's an independent organization. Nobody owns it, not even the government. But it is recognized as a national standards creating body of the UK. And what happens is that we are told by the industry, we would like to get a standard on something, on a particular topic. What we do is, we gather the experts from different parts of the industry, and we bring them together. They have the knowledge, we don't have the knowledge, I mean, to be honest with you. But we know the technique of how to create a standard. So we bring the knowledge, and that knowledge is then condensed and prepared into a form of standard. And so we publish it. What happens with the ISO is that when they see something good which has come out from BSI, they actually request BSI, can we take your article? And and most of the times we give it away. We give it away without any cost. So they take it first, they look at it, they have their committees, they look at it, and because there's already something to go by, then they decide, oh, okay, can we modify this for a global audience, or this is good enough? That's how, when ISO 9000 was first published in 1989, or 1987, sorry. When it was first published, it was 100% word-to-word copy from a BS to ISO. So they have been like this all the time. So as I was explaining to you, there's a standard BS, ISO 31000 for risk management. There was also a BS standard before that. It was a BS standard which was 31,000 series, and that got changed into an ISO standard. As I was mentioning to you, there is the anti-bribery standard is possibly getting into an ISO standard. There are many other standards getting into an ISO standard. So they take the IP and recreate it. It's much easier. It's faster. Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that.